Test your might.
Finish him!
Hey everybody, welcome to Sequelitis.
Welcome to Sequelitis.
I'm Matt,
And I'm Manny.
and we're here to talk about Mortal Kombat!
That's right. Round one. Fight. Finish him!
Finish him!
So to specify, we're talking about the 2021 movie, but we are going to touch a little bit on both the 1995 and the atrocious Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
And I also watched, I want to say maybe the first half of Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge, animated film that I think was released last year. I don't know if you saw that at all.
No, I didn't even hear that. What is that?
It's actually, the storyline to it is a little similar to it's almost like if you took the 1995 film and then this new Mortal Kombat and you merge them together into a single story. It's like that. But it's animated. It's very brutal. It takes a lot of cues from from Mortal Kombat 10 and 11 with the way they have like the X-ray vision on the brutalities and fatalities and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, definitely check it out. If you like Mortal Kombat, check it out. If you didn't really like the new film, you might like this better. But if you just think Mortal Kombat's a dopey idea and should have stayed in the 90s where it belonged, then don't bother.
Yeah, so with this one, what do you want to do as far as like spoilers? Like what even institutes a spoiler with a movie like this? Because for me, I feel like if I say it's good or it's bad, that's already kind of a spoiler, because when you go in to see this movie, you don't want to walk in and know that you're going to go watch a bad movie,
Well, I think with this movie, people had decided before it even came out whether or not they liked it. And it's not as if there's like anything that is really that spoilerific. It's the plot of the movie is pretty straightforward and extremely predictable. So I don't know. I guess we do the thing that we tend to do, kind of cowardly, where we avoid spoilers until we just can't avoid them anymore.
Yeah,
does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay,
Right on.
so let's walk through the plot of this movie a little bit. So the first thing we see in this movie, the first thing we see is this ultra, I thought, very boring scene that takes place in feudal Japan, where a pseudo Sub-Zero fights like a pseudo Scorpion kind of character. And what I didn't like about it, I will tell you, is that you had the one guy who was playing Scorpion, and he had like a very grounded kind of a power, where he had the power to take like a garden shovel and tie a string to it and then fight with it. That was his power, which is very, very impressive. And that's just a guy with a garden shovel, that could fight really well. And then the other guy could create ice out of nowhere and stab people with it. And I felt like that it was a very unfair advantage for the Iceman.
Yeah, like he was basically fighting Chinese Frozone. But yeah, like that's kind of where you and I differ, because I thought that opening scene was some of the best stuff in the film. Like, I'll go ahead and give like some quick impressions. The movie, I thought, was entertaining for what it was. It's definitely not a good movie. If you're a super Mortal Kombat nerd, which I gotta imagine is like a pretty small fan base, not like it's only a few hundred people, it's probably a few million people, but it's nothing like you have with Marvel, DC, even with King Kong Godzilla. It's got to be a smaller fan base than that. But it's something that if you are already a fan of this, like, you're gonna love it. But for pretty much like everybody else, like anybody who remembers the game, the arcade game from the 90s, you have nostalgia for that. If you have like any kind of like just critical taste for movies, you're gonna see a lot of flaws in this, and it's gonna come off as pretty dopey for you. Um, but you said that you watched it with some of your friends, and you guys are really entertained. Like when I watched it the first time, like I was enjoying it. I was laughing at it, but I was enjoying it for what it was. But I feel like there was a lot of potential for it to actually be a pretty good movie, and it needed to do something to where it either went super serious and took that opening scene and did that all throughout the movie, or it needed to like do away with stuff like that and be just ultra ridiculous and over the top all throughout. And that would have been a lot of fun and pretty entertaining in itself. But I really enjoyed the conflict between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, even though a lot of that shit didn't make any sense or they didn't explain a lot of things. And then Kano was the best fucking character in the movie, besides Hanzo Hashimi.
Yeah, I was gonna give you a pop quiz. Like, you'll never believe who the most dynamic character in the whole movie is, and the answer is yes, of course, Kano.
Yeah,
Which is
and the reason why Kano's character works so well is because like both the actor and the way the character is written, they are very self-aware of what kind of movie that they're in, and they're not taking any of this shit seriously. And that's where the movie was the most fun.
yeah. And I do want to say that I am a fan of Mortal Kombat as far as like, I mean, what is Mortal Kombat? Mortal Kombat is a video game. To me, it's a Sega Genesis 16-bit video game because that's what it was to me. I loved the first one. I absolutely loved the first one when it came out. The second one, I kind of had a little bit of harsh feelings towards it just because it was like such an expensive game. Like when it first came out, I remember it cost me like $80 at Toys R Us, and I remember just taking it home and buying it, taking it home and playing it, and just feeling like I had this. Even then, when I was a young kid, I had these expectations about what is going to.
Sorry, what
Sorry,
happened there?
sorry.
Was it your cat going crazy?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I remember being disappointed because I wanted, the game to sort of expand the universe of what the game was, and the sequel to the game was so similar to the first one. It's like basically the exact same game again, but
Yeah,
with a
they
few more
they
characters.
slightly updated the graphics, added some more characters, added some new settings. And at the time, like that's the kind of things you could expect from video games. What was really interesting was when they announced they were making the movie. And I feel like when that original movie came out, like that was right about the peak in popularity for Mortal Kombat, and with its cultural relevance. And I went and watched that in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was something that I was excited about, but at the same time, like I kind of had this fear that it was going to be cheesy.
Yeah.
And when this movie was announced, I was like, yeah, like it makes sense for them to remake Mortal Kombat. It's just kind of like, are they going to do something that is fun and goofy and weird and crazy? Because there's a lot of potential for that with the franchise and all the lore that they built up. Or are they going to do something that like tries to be more serious, like how that opening sequence was? And it seems like they tried to kind of do a little Johnny Cage split,
Yeah.
and touch both things at the same time, and I think that was a mistake.
Yeah, it seems like what happens in the first scene represents like one completely different take on the movie than what kind of happens towards the end. And I will say that for me, once we got to like the middle to towards the end of the movie did pick up and start to get a lot better because it was just kind of being silly. But there were some characters that were so ill-conceived in the thing, like Shang Tsung was so ill-conceived. It was such a unjoyful experience to like watch him. they should give us a version of Shang Tsung that is interesting. Maybe he has like a maniacal laugh or something, or he has some kind of like interest.
Like they did in the first movie.
Yeah, and
Like he's like, I'm gonna go and suck up all your souls. Ha ha ha.
yeah,
Like he was, mustache twirling villain,
yeah,
that was fun. This representation of Shang Tsung was bad. And I don't know if you recognize the actor who played him. Every time he pops up in a movie, like I roll my eyes because I don't think the guy's a good actor at all. I've not seen anything where he has given a good performance. And every time I see him, I just see him as an actor in The Dark Knight. And it's just like, in that movie, like he stood out to me because it's like, this is such an ill-fitting character. Why is he here? I don't know. I guess it was kind of the thing of like, let's cast a Chinese actor to get some of them, Chinese bucks. In this movie, it makes more sense to have Asian actors in it because there's that lore. Although like how authentic it is, I'm not, in the right position to say that. But yeah, like Shang Tsung was so boring. Like that's where they really dropped the ball to make this a more interesting and more entertaining film, and to make people more eager to see where like what's going to come next. Because obviously they're either setting up like their own kind of like franchise, or they're setting up a series. And I think if you want to do that, like the best thing that they should have done was to stick with the tone that they set and really focus on the rivalry between Bihan and Hanzo Hasashi, and the Lin Kuei and the Shirai Ryu clans. Because I have I can guess what that was, but like, did you notice them like explain any of that at all?
No, they didn't. I think that's
No.
stuff that's in the game somewhere. Like if you read the text or something.
Yeah. And I've got a big problem with stuff like that. And this is where like, what a lot of the people who are defending this movie, and it's like, if you like this movie, that's fine. Like you can like it for whatever reasons that you like it. But there are people that are telling other people that like, well, you should appreciate it for this. And it's like, look, if I need to go, study supplemental materials to understand like the plot and, conflicts that are happening in this movie, then that to me is a failure. The movie should stand on its own. I shouldn't need to go and play, hours and hours of like 8 different Mortal Kombat games, or like go read, several Wikipedia articles to understand like why this character hates this character. Like you need to put that in the film. And like for something as standard as, well, this guy wants to kill this guy, it's like in 5 seconds you can explain why.
Yeah, it really seems like they didn't even take the little bit of time it would take to explain like, what does this dude have against this other dude. It's like, I get what Scorpion has against Sub-Zero, because he tried to kill him.
Well, not only that, Bihan like murders Sub-Zero's family. Like he's on this mission to like wipe out his entire bloodline. And it's like, okay, what did Hanzo do that motivated him to want to do that? That's the conflict. That's what the movie should have been about.
Yeah, they totally
the movie wasn't even about the Mortal Kombat tournament. They never get to the Mortal Kombat tournament. Like this is a prequel that just is kind of all over the place.
Yeah, that was the absolute worst part about the movie. The fact that there's no tournament. And when I was watching it with my friends last night, they were saying the exact same thing. Like, so when does the tournament start? Like, as we got to the third act, it's like, you're going to love this. Never.
Surprise, bitch. It doesn't.
Yeah.
No, you say that's the worst part of the movie. Like, I don't mind that they didn't actually get to the tournaments. But what I did mind is what I think is the worst part of this movie, and that's the main character. That actor is just a charisma drain. Like he has like almost no personality whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And he really came off like a character that, somebody else came in and tried to invent it for something that already had a lot of pre-established lore. And that's because that's exactly who he is. Like the character of Cole was a pure invention for this movie. He's not based on a previous character.
Yeah, and that's the most disappointing thing about the movie too. Well, maybe everything is disappointing about this movie, I guess, but the single you're right. The single most disappointing thing about the movie, the fact that you spend the whole time wondering like, "Oh, who's this guy going to turn out to be?" And it kind of seems like he's going to turn into Scorpion at some point. And it would have been such an easy call to make. All you would have had to do is change that one scene. You remember that one scene where the Hulk comes into the movie all of a sudden?
Yeah. That threw me off. I'm like, is Goro the fucking Hulk?
Yeah. Yeah, the Hulk has Mark Ruffalo's Hulk has a surprise cameo in this movie. And,
yeah, they're like, hey, Marvel, can we borrow your character model?
Yeah. Yeah, they just copy and pasted it right from the computer files. Like, we'll just reanimate this however we like to do it. But
we'll just copy and paste 2 more arms onto them.
Yeah, so basically the heart of this movie is the idea that every Mortal Kombat fighter has a thing called an Arcana, which is like their superpower. And first they have to have the dragon marking, and then once they have the dragon marking, then they can gain the Arcana. Which I thought was so. I thought the way that Sonya Blade is that her name, Sonya Blade? I thought the way
Sonya Blade.
I thought the way her
or Sonya Exposition, as they ought to call her.
Yeah, but the way her story played out made the most sense. It's like she gets the marking, and then immediately she has the power. Like, I think that's how it should be. Like, getting the marking should be the hard thing to do, but once you get the marking, then you have the power. But the idea that you have to like unlock it. All that does is create a lot of scenes that sound exactly like what you think they would sound like, where characters stand around being like, when's my power going to come? What's my power?
Yeah. And the way that they had it play out with Kano was a cool scene. And they didn't really replicate that with the rest of the characters.
No.
Because with Cole, like, his Arcana was getting his ass kicked until he basically absorbed the damage and then like was able to redirect that. Like, that's literally like something that they did in Black Panther,
Yeah.
where like you take impacts and then that just builds up kinetic energy that you can then redirect onto your opponent. But like, at least in that movie, they explained what was going on. And this, like, they did do some visual storytelling with it, but it was just kind of like, I was looking at it and there were 2 things that popped in my head watching when 4-armed Hulk was kicking the shit out of our main character. So basically this guy's superpower is getting his ass kicked. Like, that's what his Arcana was. Like, Raiden's like, you're good at one thing, getting your ass wrecked.
Well,
and then
the way they set him up from the very beginning was he loses a cage match, an MMA style cage match. It's like, how can I root
that he was winning?
How can I root for a character who can't even beat some random guy off the street? What makes you think he's going to be able to win Mortal Kombat? And then surprise, he doesn't.
Well, and I have a thought about that. But I was going to say the other thing I noticed about that was like the movie gave him literal plot armor. like this character has basically like no reason to exist. They're like, oh, well, he's the descendant of Hanzo, and it's like, yeah, but also so is his daughter. And so is however many other number of people. And then like, there's no explanation of like, is that the reason why he has the dragon mark? Like, is it something that like the descendants of certain people get? Like, there's so much stuff that they just didn't explain. And my thought was, and this is going to get into a little bit of spoilers here. Are we okay to do that?
Yeah, I'm okay. I feel like we already.
Because this is really the only. This is really the only thing to spoil in it. And, I figure most people listening to or watching this already know, but Johnny Cage is in the movie, which fine, who cares, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why we had Cole instead of Johnny Cage.
Right.
And the only explanation that anybody's given to me was that the whole idea is that Cole is supposed to go forward and be like this character who in future installments is going to recruit other characters. But it's like, That doesn't make any sense. Like Johnny Cage or Liu Kang or literally any other character could serve that function. I don't understand why you had to invent a new character that sucks and not include like a character that's been there since the beginning of the franchise.
Well, I
Because
yeah.
the whole thing is like Cole is like this washed up fighter whose best days are behind him. That's literally who Johnny Cage's character is.
Right. Yeah, they really substituted him for no reason whatsoever. And it would so.
And then they fucking teased him at the end of the movie
Yeah,
as sequel bait.
that was horrible. And it would be so neat to see Johnny Cage actually done right. Because I just watched the first Mortal Kombat movie, or I watched the first like 20 or 30 minutes of it as a reference. And the way they do Johnny Cage in that movie is also really horrible. Because the whole thing about Johnny Cage, for those who don't understand this, is that the whole movie Mortal Kombat is based on the movie Bloodsport, which stars Jean-Claude Van Damme. And the thing about Jean-Claude Van Damme is that he really pulls off this thing that like he's a movie star and he's like an incredible martial artist. Not a whole lot of people have really pulled that off. Like even Bruce Lee, people don't think of Bruce Lee as like a movie star. They think of him as like an amazing martial artist. But Jean-Claude Van Damme in that time period especially was kind of walking that line of like, oh, he can act, he's a good actor, he's a good, which is not really true, but in that time period it was like that was kind of that was his persona.
He became a box office draw. Like he was almost to the level of Schwarzenegger and Stallone, which they were huge action stars going into the 90s. And he was kind of positioned to like, be the next after, as they kind of descended, he was ascending. And that's the whole thing is like the Mortal Kombat game is kind of loosely based on the idea of the Kumite, this secret, tournament that involves people fighting to the death in some cases. Except, video game lore, it has to involve like, evil forces defeating good forces and all that crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Johnny Cage, the character of Johnny Cage was very much based on Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah. And like, I don't know. I mean, like maybe you could have got Jean-Claude Van Damme for this movie, which would have been kind of neat.
I think you definitely could have. I think that's the move 100%. 100%. Yeah. I think that's the whole draw that could be the whole draw of Mortal Kombat. But
plus it would bring everything back full circle because the character was based on him and now he's playing that character so many years later.
Yeah, and somehow, and this doesn't even matter at all, but somehow he got wrapped up in the Street Fighter franchise, which is just so bizarre because like, Mortal Kombat is based on him and he went to do Street Fighter, but no one even remembers that movie. That movie basically doesn't even really count, but it does exist.
Oh, people remember it.
And so does
people remember
so does Double Dragon. If you want to see a horrible movie double feature.
Now that's a movie people do not remember. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, but back to the whole thing about Cole. I mean, what they should have done with Cole, I don't think that it should have been about Johnny Cage, though, ultimately. I think it should have been about Scorpion. And they missed that. They missed the mark. Yeah. Like, the two main characters should have been either Scorpion and or Sub-Zero. And, Sub-Zero wasn't really the main villain as much as all that. He was kind of like the secondary main henchman, I would say. Or the second to the top henchman, or the third to the top henchman. Because the chick, was it Melina with the big mouth and the teeth, and then Goro. And then those guys seemed like worser henchmen than Sub-Zero. It was just like Sub-Zero had more of a stake in the story because his personal connection with Scorpion, but he just didn't come off to me as like, I don't know. And like even though they didn't really explain like what the conflict was between Hanzo and Bi-Han, you at least understood like there's something there. Like Hanzo must have had like a past that brought them into conflict, and now Sub-Zero's getting his revenge, which means now Hanzo's got to get his revenge, so on and so forth. But you at least understand that without having everything explained. But there was other stuff like, so Hanzo dies in feudal Japan,
and then his body like immediately turns to ash, which I'm like, what's going on here? Like, what's and then Raiden shows up, and it's like, well, did that have something to do with Raiden? Did this have anything to do with Mortal Kombat? Like, was Mortal Kombat like, was that something that was going on during this time period? And then it just kind of like jumps to the present time, and now it's like Bihan is now Sub-Zero working for Shang Tsung. They don't explain any of that. They don't explain how he is essentially immortal at this point, even though they can kill him later on. So it's just like, the fuck is going on?
Well,
like, why are you leaving all this out? Like, why are you focusing on this shit that's way less interesting than having these two characters, which the actors playing them were great. The fights and everything, like those were the most intense fights in the entire film. That's the best stuff. Focus on the best stuff. Focus on that storyline and how it kind of plays against the backdrop of Mortal Kombat and how that affects, everybody on the face of the earth. And instead, it's just kind of this like globe-trotting adventure, except they don't really globe-trot anywhere. They go from one location to another, and then that's kind of it. And then it's just like, oh, well, now everybody's fighting, but it's not really the tournament yet. And that's the end of the movie. Make sure you come back and see Johnny Cage.
Well, the other problem, too, is that the movie has a lot of melodrama with the characters. It starts in the very first scene, all this melodrama between Scorpion's family and Scorpion, and, just like all this, like, oh, I love you so much, wife. You're so great. Oh, you're great to me. All this kind of bull crap. And
sure would hate if anything bad happened to you today.
Yeah, and then in the present, you've got Han, and he's got, Cole. Which, can you just try to create like a new Mortal Kombat character? Like, get a name like Scorpion, Reptile, Sub-Zero, Raiden. I'm not saying that those are easy things to come up with, but come up with one. That's your job as the writer. Come up with a character that kind of fits in that world. This guy Cole, he doesn't fit in the Mortal Kombat world at all. You need to create a character that makes me feel like, oh, he could have been in the game. This game has been missing this great character, Cole. I just don't feel like that. I feel like,
well, yeah,
get him out of the way.
And going back to what you said before was that, you were kind of expecting Cole to basically turn into the new Scorpion, because that is something that is in this movie. Like, you have Kung Lao.
They tease that.
Yeah, where he comes out and he's like, I'm the descendant of another Kung Lao. So it's just like, okay, well, then that would make sense that, very obviously, Cole is a descendant of Hanzo. So it's like Hanzo, like Cole embodies Hanzo's like strength and abilities, and he becomes Scorpion. But that's not what happens. Scorpion comes back, and then it's like, oh, we got Scorpion and Cole. And it's like, the fuck do we need Cole for then? Why is he even here?
Yeah, and Scorpion has the ability to just rise up from hell whenever he wants to spoilers, to lose again to Sub-Zero. Doesn't he lose again at the end? Doesn't Scorpion like get killed again?
No. He does his little fire breathing
fatality. Yeah, that's right.
On Sub-Zero, which that like the impact of that was already kind of like lessened, because just before that you had Liu Kang do his fire dragon fatality to Cabal. And it's just like, why are you inventing a new character? Because like, I don't know a ton about the games, but I do know that, the few times that they've tried to invent a new character, because originally like Liu Kang was the hero of Mortal Kombat. Both in the game and in the movie, he was the one who defeated Shang Tsung and won the tournament and everything.
He's the Bruce Lee of the game.
But whenever the franchise like kind of hit like a dead end, and they're like, oh, we need to kind of like do some reinvention in order to refresh the franchise and keep it relevant, they would invent like a new character. And I know like one of the ones that they invented, people are just like, who is this fucking guy? Like, he's an idiot. Like, he's kind of fucking things up.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't that interesting. Like nothing on the level of a Liu Kang or Scorpion. So like the original favorite characters that everybody liked to play as, those are still the most interesting and relevant characters. And just it was a very big miscalculation on their part to be like, no, we need to invent this new character and he's going to be like the face of the franchise. And it's like,
Well,
no.
I mean, what they were going for was the idea that you're seeing the world of Mortal Kombat through this guy's eyes, and it's not
Which
clouded.
again,
Yeah.
Johnny Cage, you're relaunching the franchise. It's like Johnny Cage makes sense because you could have all these people who are like, I'm the descendant of so and so, and my great uncle was so and so, and like I've been trained since childhood. And then you have this douchebag American actor come in and be like, well, I had the best box office back in 1994. You know,
Yeah, and then on top of that, the issue with the Mortal Kombat narrative is that, how do you get into it exactly? And the first movie took the same tactic as Bloodsport, which was a good tactic, but the problem is that Johnny Cage is not really like the main hero of Mortal Kombat. So if you take the narrative journey from Bloodsport, then you're going to end up with Johnny Cage at the end of the movie as the winner, or in a team with the winners, which is what happened in the first movie. And first of all, we've been there and done that, and secondly, it doesn't really explain the whole Mortal Kombat tournament or the Outworld. And in this movie, the way they try to do it is that Sonya Blade is like researching Mortal Kombat, and with all her research, and she cares so much about this tournament. We don't really know why she cares so much. We don't really know, you know, we don't know how she knows all the stuff that she knows. They don't.
it's because she like flat earth and QAnon just wasn't doing it for her, but people with these dragon tattoo birthmarks, she's like, I feel like there's something here and the fake news media isn't covering it. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and then she has
That was like her level of energy.
and she has Kano chained up in her house, and there's no explanation of like why he's chained up in her house. And then as soon as he gets unchained, they're all like they're friends. And it's like that wouldn't be my friend.
Yeah. And that was another thing too. It's like, if you're not going to sit here and do like the whole movie about Sub-Zero versus Scorpion, then at least do like Sonya Blade and Kano and Jax, like that whole thing, which isn't really that original or interesting of an idea, but like what they did instead wasn't that interesting or original of an idea either. And it was just kind of this like muddled, mess of things to where like you'd have these really cool, fun moments. And then it would just like kind of drop and sag. And then you just like, I remember one of the things when I watched Street Fighter in the movie theater, like that was a super goofy and cartoonish movie. But the part of the movie to where like, even as I think I was like a 13, 14-year-old kid, I was watching and I was like, okay, this is crap, was at the end when they have everybody fighting and they kept just jumping, like jump cutting in between fights of characters. And you're just like, going like, okay, what the fuck is going on? And they did that a bit here. It was a little bit more coherent, but like you have these characters that you don't really care about fighting against these other characters that you don't even really know. Like there was a guy with a hammer, and again, like I haven't really kept up with the games since Mortal Kombat 3. So I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. There was some harpy bitch.
Yeah.
And she gets ridden into like Kung Lao's little bandsaw fatality. And I'm like, okay, cool.
That Kung Lao. Can I always stop and say that Kung Lao? Everything about Kung Lao in this movie was awesome. Like that was the one thing that they got 100% right.
Yeah, and that's the character that like he gets they treat him like a bitch. like he doesn't even get to fight Shang Tsung. Like he just walks up to him and he's like, I'm gonna suck you dry.
Yeah.
And it's like, at least like have them fight, like at least like get him to the point of getting defeated. Cause like that is canon to the game. Like you don't end up in a fight with Shang Tsung in the game and he just, first move sucks your soul and then you lose. Like you have to fight him, you have to lose 2 rounds, and then he has to do that fatality to you. So it's like, you don't like he's the one guy who's actually able to kick some ass. and then he just kicks a little bit of ass, and then you're just like, yeah, we got to get him out of this movie though. Like he's gonna make Cole look bad.
Well, in the first movie, they handled Shang Tsung so much better, I have to say, because what happens in the first movie is Johnny Cage is on set of his movie, and they're like, "Hey, you've got a special visitor," and he goes over, and it's some like old friend of his that kind of reminds you of a character from Bloodsport, which is just so funny, but perfect, and he invites him to this karate tournament, the Kumite or whatever they call it, or Mortal Kombat or whatever they call it. He invites him to the tournament, and then as the old friend walks away, we do that classic scene where he's walking away and then he slowly morphs into Shang Tsung, and it's like, oh, it was Shang Tsung that invited him to the tournament. And it's like, that is better. That's a better
which is one of
idea.
That was one of the interesting, character abilities, in the game. Like when you were able to actually play as Shang Tsung was you were able to temporarily change it to another character, and then it would adopt that character's play style and their moves and stuff. They didn't do any of that in this movie. It was like literally like he was like he was glam. Like that was this Shang Tsung he was just glam and fabulous. Like he had his hair all done. Like, he had his nice, costume that he spent a lot of money on so he could really turn a lot of heads when he goes to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And he's just like, just walks in and he's like, instead of like actually playing by the rules, I'm just going to kill all your guys. And there's even like a moment in the film where they're in Outworld, which they did like a real half-assed job of like
very lazy.
Doing any kind of world building with Outworld. Like that's another, missed opportunity with this film. But he's in Outworld and he's talking to either Melina or Sub-Zero. And he's like, oh yeah, instead of just waiting for the tournament, we'll just go and kill all of Earth's champions. So that way they have nobody to send and we automatically win.
Yeah.
And he mentions that, that they could be in a lot of trouble if the elder gods find out about what they're doing. But like, it's like, okay, but the elder gods are never seen. There's no like mention of like what the actual like risk is here, like what the penalty is going to be. And so it's just like, why even bring that up?
Yeah, and then the one part they were like, Outworld has won 9 tournaments in a row. If they win a 10th tournament, it's like, why? It's such an arbitrary thing.
Yeah, that was the joke that I made. And I was like, Raiden's doing such a shitty half-assed job of like recruiting like actual champions, making sure that they're properly trained. It's like, no wonder they're the fucking Buffalo Bills of the Mortal Kombat tournament.
Yeah, it's Raiden's fault.
Like
he wants to go around blaming everybody.
We make the championship every year, but we lose. We always fucking lose.
Yeah, Raiden, that's you. You're the head coach.
Yeah, and it's just like, look, I don't know who's in charge, like who's like the team owner or the general manager for like Earthrealm, but you got to get Raiden out of there, man. Like he's good enough to get him there, but you got to find you got to bring in whoever the Phil Jackson is of the Mortal Kombat tournament to just get him over the top and get him that ring.
Yeah, and also it's like Raiden, he's so powerful, but it's like, why doesn't he like get in there and fight? It's like, what is he doing?
Yeah, and it's not something that's really explained in the movie, because like that's another thing too, is like if again you're like me, which I think most people watching this are, and you're just like, yeah, no, I remember the original games in the arcade, I remember the original movies, and I'm interested to see like what a modern take of this is going to be like. Raiden's a playable character.
Yeah,
Raiden competes in the tournament. And so it's just like, there's never any kind of explanation of precisely why Raiden isn't also in the tournaments.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, he's like, I don't remember if this is actually mentioned in the film or not, but this is coming from another fan. They're like, well, he's the protector of Earthrealm. It's like, okay, so what does that mean? And it's like, well, he can't fight in the tournaments. It's like, okay, but like, does that mean Shang Tsung, he can't fight in the tournament? Like,
yeah,
like, what are the fucking, like, you gotta, every single movie, especially something like this, has to explain how its universe works, how the rules work. And this movie does not do any of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys put all this effort into like, creating some really good effects, It's not the best fight choreography ever, but like especially the stuff between the actors who played Bihan and Hanzo and Scorpion Sub-Zero, like that, those fight sequences were really good. There were some other fight sequences that were pretty good, but not great. And it's like, you guys put in all this effort, but like, you just kind of, you farted out a first draft on this and then never went back in and said, maybe we should clean this up, or maybe we need to come up with a better storyline. Maybe we need to get rid of this terrible character Cole that we invented and just focus on, Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think I know exactly what they should have done here. What they should have done was, instead of taking the blood sport angle of, the Earth Realm people going to the Mortal Kombat tournament, what they should have done is focus on how do characters like Sub-Zero and Scorpion end up at the Mortal Kombat tournament.
Exactly.
And
how do they go from feudal Japan to modern day fighting in, for Earth Realm?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for both parties involved, the most important Mortal Kombat tournament possibly ever.
Yeah.
Because this is the one that wins it all.
Yeah, and then once they're there, then they see characters like Jax and Johnny Cage, and you can see those characters and fight with those characters and even lose to those characters if that's what needs to have happen. But just give me the perspective of who is Sub-Zero, who is Scorpion. And this explanation of who they were, I found to be very unsatisfying. Because even a guy like Scorpion, who we're supposed to be rooting for because he had his family brutally murdered, and he himself was brutally murdered, and then he came back from hell, it's like, I still don't know anything about him to like him.
Because that was one of the things that was confusing for me. It was like, okay, the way you're portraying the character is that he's a loving family man, who's trying to teach his kid right and trying to be a loving husband to his wife. He's got a new baby and everything. And then he comes in and he gets murdered by, these guys that are brutal assassins.
Yeah.
And he goes to hell. And it's just like,
yeah.
Okay, like, explain this to me.
Yeah.
And it's almost something to where, like, the more you start to think about it, the more you're like, maybe Hanzo is not a good guy, and like maybe he kind of deserved it. Because it's like he had to have done something fucked up that Bihan traveled all the way to Japan, which at that time I'm sure wasn't an easy trip to make, hunted him down, murdered his family, was going to kill a defenseless baby if he could have found it, and beat this guy to death. And it's just like, did he like molest like Bihan's kid or something like that? Like, yeah. He had to have done something, because when he died, like, his body didn't even get a chance to decompose. Like, literally, like, hell burned him to ashes and took him away.
Yeah, what should have happened is, instead of him going to hell, he should have gone to whatever fictional place the characters go to in Mortal Kombat when they die, where like Shang Tsung is like the, they go to Outworld or whatever, and Shang Tsung is like the devil of Outworld, and he's like, now I have got your soul, and like done that kind of thing. And maybe Scorpion is fighting for his own freedom. Like, if he wins the tournament, that he can be free of his like shackles to Shang Tsung, like something cool like that. Like, how hard is that?
See, it's funny that you say that, because remember what I was talking about, the animated film Scorpion's Revenge?
Yeah.
You pretty much just described the plot of it.
Oh, that's exactly what happens?
That's exactly what happens. Like, it starts off like he's walking around, Scorpion's walking around with his son. He's teaching him like little life lessons and stuff. And then Sub-Zero shows up.
Hey, little frog,
fucking
get over here.
Murders. Yeah. he murders Sub-Zero's, or he murders Hanzo's son, and then murders Hanzo. And then Hanzo, like, comes to in basically hell, and he starts fighting off all these demons. And instead of Shang Tsung, it's
Goro?
The guy that came after Shao Kahn.
Shao Kahn.
Shit, I can't remember his name.
I thought that was.
Yeah,
I thought that was the Jungle Book.
No. You're thinking Shere Khan.
Got it.
No, so Shao Kahn is Shang Tsung's boss, but then there's another guy that like came along in like Mortal Kombat 4 or whatever, and that guy in Scorpion's Revenge, he's basically like the overlord of the hell that Scorpion's being tortured in. And he, shows off. He's like, look, you can't, he's like, I control everything here. You can't do anything to me. He's like, if you want to get out of here, though, if you want to get your revenge on Sub-Zero, represent me in the Mortal Kombat tournaments. And then he sends them to Outworld or wherever the hell it's happening, and does that. And it's just like, man, like, you guys had this animated movie, like, just take that story and do it live action here.
Yeah.
And instead, it's like, we'll take a little bit of that and then we'll just add in nothing but dog turds.
Yeah, and some of the casting was so bad, I've got to say, because I was talking about how great the casting was for Kung Lao, and everything about Kung Lao was great, but for as great as everything was with Kung Lao, like, it was so bad for Liu Kang. Like, the actor they cast was so bad. He didn't look like Liu Kang. I mean... Well,
I didn't think the guy who played Kung Lao looked like Kung Lao.
No,
like, that was one of the things. It's like, I remember
like him, but his mannerisms and the way they animated his hat and his movements and everything, like, it was awesome. I thought it was awesome. I loved it. And like his intro where he came in from the bottom, like one of his moves in the game, like, that's what I want to see as a fan of Mortal Kombat. I want to see Raiden shooting lightning. I want to see. I mean, I didn't see Sub-Zero shoot one like icy fireball at anybody.
No, like he did the move where he made an ice silhouette, but that was one of the things I was talking about. And I went back and rewatched the entire movie just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, he never does. It's his most famous move.
Yeah.
Like, someone's jumping at him and he just freezes them midair.
Yeah.
And it's like, that would be such a cool thing. You guys obviously have the technology. Like, they did it in the original movie.
Yeah.
Like, but it looks like shit. Like, most of the special effects in that movie look terrible.
Yeah.
This movie, it's like, you got the budget, you got the technology, like, you have the ability to do these things, and they just drop the freaking ball so many times.
And then
that gets frustrating, because one of the things I had said about this movie was, I watched it the first time, like, immediately when it got released on HBO. We watched it, and that was because my girlfriend really, really wanted to watch it. We watched it, we're laughing, like, we're having a pretty good time. And then, like, when I started talking to you and to other people about it, I was like, I feel like if I go back and rewatch this movie, I'm going to really start to hate it. And that's pretty much exactly what happened, because there are things that started to stick out to me. There was stuff that I wanted to be in there, and it's just completely missing. And when you go back and rewatch it, that's when you start to notice this stuff. One of the things I want to point out, I thought this is really funny, and I wonder if you noticed it, but you're familiar with the term Chekhov's gun, right?
Yeah.
In this movie, they do Chekhov's gnome.
I know. Yeah. I caught that the second time. I didn't catch that the first time. But the second time, it's like, oh, Kano classically always has that issue with garden gnomes. And I think garden gnome is in the game somewhere, but that's the kind of Easter egg that I don't enjoy. The kind of Easter eggs I enjoy are seeing the moves from the game, but done by real people, and where the effects are really cool, and where the story is effective, and I'm enjoying the characters. Like, that's what I want to see. That is what I want to see. You got to have some characters that I'm interested in. I care about their story. Just give me a simple goal that they're supposed to achieve and where I'm rooting for them. And then give me some fight sequences where a guy throws a spear and shouts, get over here! Get over here, Show me a scene where, an Iceman freezes somebody in midair. I do love the idea of inventing new stuff with their powers, but you got to cover the basics of showing me the old stuff with their powers first before you give me the new stuff with their powers, because you haven't even done that yet. But what they did with Kung Lao, like, freeze that and expand that into a whole movie, because that was perfect. Like the scene where he's spinning up from the ground, he comes in, he throws his hat around. The one where it's the saw blade with his hat. Everything from Kung Lao was awesome. They nailed that. Whatever that was, they nailed it. For Liu Kang, my big issue was that the actor they hired the first time in the first movie was perfect. And that was the most perfect piece of Mortal Kombat casting in the history of Mortal Kombat so far. And when you can't replicate that, it's going to be a letdown. And that was the problem with this. The guy just didn't look like the character. I don't know how the character is supposed to act exactly, but he didn't look like the character, and then he didn't do the bicycle kick, which I get it because they already totally did that in the first movie. But it's like stuff like that. I want to see it. I mean, maybe I'm stupid.
Yeah,
but I want to see it.
I don't even know that he did like his. I forget what you'd call it, but like he has a special kick. It's not the bicycle kick,
yeah,
but
like
he just comes flying at someone. I don't even
the flying kick. No, he didn't do that. He didn't do the fireball like clap. He didn't do any of his like classic moves. He did the fire dragon, which was good. I didn't love the way that it looked. I definitely thought it could have been better, but it's from the game, so it was cool.
Yeah, and the problem is that you have all these characters, but you don't really take any time to kind of develop them. Besides, what they did for Cole, which he was boring. I didn't give a fuck about him. Like those are the parts of the movie really dragged, was every time it was really focused on Cole. And like half the movie, he's just kind of like, oh, I keep getting my butt kicked. And I just want to go home to my family. And like Raiden literally tells him, he's like, bitch, there you go home, get out of here. Like, It's like, this is your hero for your movie. This guy is your hero. So like he's the only one that really had any kind of character development. They did it a little bit for Sonya and Jax, but it's like, other than what you see on the screen, you don't really know much about them, except Jax did 6 tours and he still got his ass kicked. So whatever.
Yeah. And
then you had Kano, and he just that actor like really kicked ass with that role. And so that's not really a lot of credit to the writers. And it's just like, I know people are going to like hear someone say like, oh, well, you didn't really develop the characters, so I didn't really give a shit about them. And they're like, well, it's a movie called Mortal Kombat. Like, do you really want them to develop the characters? And it's like, yeah, if you're going to do the story this way, you need to develop the characters. So I care when something happens to them. I'm like, otherwise, if you're not going to develop the characters, like have crazy fights. Like show us all the special moves. Like if you're going to do the fan service of having, Kano yelling, Kano wins, and
Kano wins.
Kung Lao going, flawless victory, like goofy shit like that like flawless literally victory stops the movie down to reference it. It's like if you're gonna do stuff like that, like just make it like a live action adaptation of the game. Like literally, like it's like, okay, this guy's gonna fight this guy now. And you just look at him and you're like, okay, that's Jax. And that's, Baraka. Like, Baraka's got sword arms.
Yeah.
Jax has got robot arms. Yeah. And they didn't do that. It's like they half-assed the character development and they didn't give us enough good fights.
Yeah, and 2 things I want to say before we get off here. Make sure we say.
All right.
One thing is the way they opened up with Cole. A couple things about Cole, because we haven't really said this stuff yet. First of all, the first time we meet Cole, he's got this trainer that's like giving him a hard time, and the trainer says to him, "Oh, an opponent? No, you don't have an opponent. Who am I fighting? A fight? No, a fight that requires offense and defense, Cole. Something you don't know anything about." It's like, okay, and what does that mean, and how does that like ever come back into the story? And it doesn't, because he does spend the whole time on defense. Like he's never an offensive character. His only offensive thing is in the first 1 second of his fight, he throws like 10 great punches. He's like, ta, 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 ta. And I'm kind of like, whoa, this dude's a badass puncher. Like, cool. I'll watch a movie with a badass puncher. That looks awesome. That looks totally like a video game. That looks like Mortal Kombat. That kind of had me hyped a little bit. And then he immediately loses to the guy, and then he spends the whole rest of the movie in defense mode, getting his ass kicked time after time after time after time. And he never is an offensive character. So that line never made sense to me. And then the other thing I want to say is, what was up with Jax's baby arms?
Oh my God, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring it up. That, like,
that was
you see him get his arms
thing.
Like. That was one of the things is like, the first second, like he like showed up and he's like, hey, Cole, get in the car. You're just like, this motherfucker is getting his arms ripped off. Like you're just sitting there waiting. You're like, when is it going to happen? And then they don't even actually do that. Like Sub-Zero freezes his arms off, which yeah, kind of a cool effect.
I was
but
okay
it's
with
just
that.
like it's like yeah. Like I've already seen you turn people into popsicles. So,
Yeah.
um, but like you get to the Shaolin Temple, and it's just like okay, like there he is without his arms. When is he gonna get the arms?
Yeah.
And then the next time you see him, he's got these dinky ass little arms. And man, that scene where he's like trying to hit the punching bag.
He's like, these don't work. These little baby arms don't work. It's so stupid.
That shit was so hilarious. And then it was like, oh, okay, his arcana is now he's got full on robot arms. But it's just like, was that what his arcana was always going to be? Was, he was going to go in there and start training, and then just one day his regular arms are going to turn into robot arms? Or like, was that like a response to, it's like, well, we were going to give you like a different power, but you ain't got no arms. So I guess robot arms.
Let me do an instant rewrite on what they should have done. Go back to the scene where he's fighting Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero grabs him with his arms. He freezes his arms all the way off. His arms break off, and then right then and there, new robot arms like grow while his like tattoo thing is like glowing. And he's like, "Oh, that's my power," because Jax has kind of an unexplained power. Like there's sort of an untapped potential to Jax's character because we don't really understand why does he have robot arms anyway. So, kind of gives you this idea, like maybe if he gets his leg chopped off, he'll grow a robot leg. Who knows what's going to happen? It kind of gives you an untapped potential, somewhere to go with that character. That's what they should have done. But it didn't make any sense that he magically made it to the same place where everyone else had to like trek to. It was that same thing from like Godzilla versus King Kong, where it's this big perilous journey for them to get to the Shaolin Temple, and then once they get there, Jax is already there. It's like, well, couldn't we have just rode with Jax?
Yeah. Like it was stuff that the writers were just like, nobody's going to really think about this. And it's just like, well, I mean, we're the couple of assholes who will think about that and like question it. And so, yeah, it's like, don't half-ass it like this. Like, give the fans more, because if you're just going to kind of just make shit up, don't call it Mortal Kombat. Like they're calling it Mortal Kombat because they want that Mortal Kombat money. They want the Mortal Kombat fan base to come out for this. And it's like, okay, if you want them, reward them for coming out. Like, give them stuff. And like just the Jax thing, so weird, so bizarre. Like all of it, like outside of Kung Lao, Sub-Zero and Scorpion, like the rest of it, like just fell way short.
Well, I have to say, Jax as his full like robot arm Jax, I did like. I felt like that was a good representation of Jax, and that actor was he kind of turned in like a Michael Jai White style performance, but ultimately
that's who they should have got. Like they should have had Michael Jai White. And I don't know, maybe they just weren't offering enough. Like Michael Jai White, like I know that he played Jax in the Mortal Kombat web series. So that's already kind of established. Like he looks the part and everything. It's like, get that guy. Cause like the actor they got, I think Makad Brooks is his name. Like he was fine, but like literally you're looking at him going like, yeah, but I wish this is Michael J. White,
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing I was thinking is that I learned that Casper Van Dien in season 2 of the web series, he played Johnny Cage. And like that's one of those things. I mean, there's a ton of actors that kind of fit this mold of just like at one point they're kind of a big deal and now they're kind of a joke. And like, he fits that pretty well. If Jean-Claude Van Damme was, 20 years younger, he would be so perfect. I think he could still play the role. Like, I've seen JCVD, both the movie and the Amazon series. Mm-hmm. And it's like, he can still get out there and act and everything. He's still got some physicality. But, like there's so many like perfect faces for this. And instead they were just kind of like, well, here's a bunch of people, if you're into like certain martial arts films you've heard of, but, outside of that, sub fan base, like the rest of us are just looking at it and going like, who's this?
Yeah, and I have to admit, I never played the later Mortal Kombat games. I checked out before 3 even came out. because 2 kind of in the time it rubbed me so much the wrong way that 3 I was just like I can't go in there and do it again. I can't spend this money again for the same game again. I did love the Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero game, though. I played that on PlayStation 1. I loved that game. It definitely was kind of a buggy ass game, kind of a weird game, but ultimately I really liked it. I liked like the puzzle solving. I liked the fighting, small little bad guys, a lot of them instead of fighting like one big boss. To me, that was like the natural evolution of Mortal Kombat. Fighting
Yeah.
some little guys, kind of maybe doing a little platforming. That's what I wanted Mortal Kombat 2 to be for whatever reason. I don't know why I thought that's what it could have been, or like a story mode of that could have been. But 3 I checked out of. I never played 4. I never played Mortal Kombat X. I was trying to play it with my friends last night because he has it on his Xbox, but he had to re-download it, and then it needed an update, and it was like, oh no, this is gonna take hours to be able to play.
Oh yeah.
Fucking new video games, man. It's like, say what you will about Sega Genesis, but I mean, at least you can just pop the cartridge in, turn it on, and now you can play it. It's like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's if you still, can get yourself a working Sega Genesis. Like, not to get too off subject, but like that's one of the sad things about retro video games. It's like a lot of those original consoles, like eventually they're gonna stop working because like their capacitors are gonna get worn out. I mean, you can always have somebody who actually knows how to fix those things, fix them, or just buy like like they have the updated versions, where they're not from Sega or Nintendo, but they'll play, Genesis, Super Nintendo games, stuff like that. You can always do that. But yeah, like modern video games, dude, it's amazing that they still manage to make like good, decent new games, because it's actually so much worse than movie production. Because movie production, you'll put, millions of dollars into a movie, and you have to get all these different people involved, from your writers to your producers to your cast to your crew to your editors, post-production and everything. And that can absolutely fail on you.
yeah.
To the point to where the movie never even gets released, and you just dump millions of dollars into it. Like it's part of a financial strategy for movie studios to literally like say like, you know what, we're writing off this movie as a $30 million, $120 million loss. But with video game franchises, I mean, those things, you need massive teams, people working like 60 hours a week sometimes, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and years of development for a game that, like, I don't know if you've heard of Cyberpunk 2077.
I've heard of it.
But like, yeah, you'll have a game that will come out and doesn't even function.
Are the police coming for you right now? What's going on?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. No.
They're
They're about to spawn behind me and just.
Let's close up this review. We're at an hour now. What's your final thoughts here?
Well, what I wanted to sit here and say was, you had mentioned earlier like a pretty good triple feature of the original Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and then what was the other one that you said?
Double Dragon.
Double Dragon, yeah. That could be a pretty fun triple feature to watch. What is the triple feature you would do with this movie?
Let's see. With this one, I'd want to watch a real good kung fu movie. So I would watch this one, and then I would watch Ung Bak. Did you ever see that one? Thai Warrior, I think it's called.
I've seen parts of it, but I've never seen it all the way through.
This actor in that is Tony Jaa, and he's kind of like a Jean-Claude Van Damme. I don't know if he's still around. I don't even know. Maybe he's one of the guys in this movie, and I just didn't recognize him. But he
should have been in this movie.
He would have been incredible. I mean, I think he would have been a smarter choice. I don't even know who they cast for Liu Kang. I would sound really stupid if it was Tony Jaa in that part.
Ludi Lin is his name.
And
he's from something. I mean, like the guy who played Cole. I think his name is Michael Tan.
Mm-hmm.
But like he was in a couple of other like films or series that people were like, oh yeah, no, he's pretty good. But I mean, I can't tell from this.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, all right, okay,
Well,
what's your third
the third one would be Kira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, to go with the feudal Japan, so we can see how that see how that's done the right way.
See, but I feel like if you do that, you're gonna have some real problem with like drop off in quality. Where like it's like you got a couple of really good films and then just down to Mortal Kombat. But maybe you're like drinking or smoking as everything's going along. By the time you get to Mortal Kombat, like you just don't give a fuck anymore. I was gonna say I want to be a little bit more consistent with the quality of the movies.
Go ahead.
So my triple feature is Mortal Kombat. Any Resident Evil movie after the first one, so 2 through 6, I think, because it doesn't matter. You can fucking pop in at any point. And then I think Tony Jaa's most recent movie is it's one with Nicolas Cage, and I'm trying to make a triple feature with a movie that I don't know the name of it.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a little bit of like Mortal Kombat, but basically like Tony Jaa, Nicolas Cage, and a few other actors have to fight an alien that shows up on Earth. So it's like a mix of like Mortal Kombat and Predator. But this movie came out last year, like during the pandemic, and it's pretty nuts. From what I understand, I think that'd be a pretty fun triple feature to do.
We'll have to look that one up. Let me wrap up my thoughts. I definitely, the first time I watched this movie, I thought it was very bad. But then I watched it again with my friends. We were having some drinks, and we were all making jokes because we're all funny people. We all know how to make each other laugh. So it's like I was laughing at the jokes my friends were making, but I was laughing, So it made it a much easier like pill to swallow. And they both enjoyed it, because they just had that same experience I had, which was an enjoyable experience hanging out with your friends and watching a stupid movie. But the movie on its own is not a good movie. It tries to be one thing at the very beginning and then spends the whole movie running in the opposite direction, and both are bad. When I think Mortal Kombat, I don't think feudal Japan. Like I get what you're doing with that. And I don't think it's like ridiculous, but it's not Mortal Kombat. It's like you take what Mortal Kombat is, and if you can't do the special effects, then you would do the feudal Japan thing. But when you can do the special effects, it doesn't really make sense. And then when you fuse in the Sub-Zero's powers are there in feudal Japan, but Scorpion doesn't have his power, it's like it just doesn't make sense. It's not enjoyable to see the guy that you're rooting for get beat by an icicle man. Who's doing that cold, like Jet Li look the whole time, where he's like, Went to the Jet Li School of Acting. Reminds me of Jet Li from Lethal Weapon 4. And it's not a good movie, and but it definitely is not nearly as good as King Kong versus Godzilla. It's disappointing in the same kind of way that the Justice League was, but just not as long. But I could recommend that you watch this if you have some friends that like Mortal Kombat, and you guys. Oh, that's the perfect triple feature actually, is to play the game Mortal Kombat before and after watching the movie, and then you got to watch the first Mortal Kombat. That's all there is to it. You watch the first Mortal Kombat, you watch this one, and then you watch the Scorpion's Revenge movie. So apparently that one is actually kind of decent. But all right, I'm gonna call it a day on Sequelitis, and thank you guys for watching. I'm Matt,
and I'm Manny,
and
finish him.
This has been Mortal Kombat.
Sequelitis.
Finish him.